Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our second session of day one at Next Innovation Week US edition with an extreme interesting topic. And if I can say so, maybe my favorite one, because I'm a huge fan in overall about design and customer experience, product experience, etc. So today's theme and title is the importance of user experience in delivering great life sciences customer experience. And really great pleasure to welcome our four amazing panelists. And first of all, I would like to start with Georgina, Sala, Gasol from Roche. Hi, Georgina, how are you?
Hi, hello, I'm fine.
Thank you. Then we have Rahul Avasti from Abbott. Hi, Rahul, how are you?
Hey, Dario, thank you for the invitation. I'm glad to be here. And what an amazing panelist.
Thank you very much, Rahul. Followed by Ritesh Patel from Ogilvy. Hi, Ritesh, how are you?
Hello, hi guys, hello everyone. Nice to see you all, and thanks for including me.
Thank you, Ritesh. And Corey Mock from Omnipresence. Hi, Corey. Same question to you. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Great. So before we start with the interactive discussion, I would like to start with one very interesting poll to our audience, of course, which is which of the below are you most interested in learning about of this today's session? So please feel free to vote. I think that 1 minute is enough time to vote, and we are currently on close to 10% of all voting. So please feel free to vote, and after that we will comment the interesting question. Okay, 30 more seconds to go. What do you think, who will be the winner?
Customer experience, I think.
Okay.
That's just my bet.
Maybe the first one.
Maybe you will influence now the answer. So, okay, 5 more seconds to go, and we are closing the poll. 70% of people voted, and the results are, so the lucky winner is with 41% the most important user experience metrics to focus on. Comments, ladies and gentlemen? Who would like to comment on that?
Metrics as in hard and soft. I mean, there are two types of metrics, right? So it'll depend on what we sort of go through, but that's very interesting. I would have thought customer experiences would have been a little bit higher, but very interesting to see. Thank you to the audience for voting.
Indeed. Georgina, Corey, Rahul?
Yeah, same here, Ritesh. I was thinking CX as well, but it's good to see because ROI, I think, has become very important from a justification perspective. Maybe a lot of people are struggling with budgets, right? And ROI really helps them get more funding for their projects or more bandwidth for their resources as well. And the game of ROI is huge, right? You know, from your internal objectives to business objectives to behavioral matrix to financial matrix. There's a lot that you need to justify, especially you are the leadership role on the UX side of it. So I like it. Interesting one.
Thank you.
Yeah, we had lots of. Go ahead, Georgina.
Sorry. Okay, I think that metrics also it's important because, as you said, Rahul, that people still need convince in their companies what are the importance, and the only way that we have so far to measure is thanks to the metrics. So if you don't have it, you cannot ask for more budget, you cannot have a bigger team, you cannot convince your leadership team.
And Corey?
Yeah, well, this is where we spend a lot of time as we're getting to know each other, and I think we've got a section to talk about it more deeply. So if we bias our time a little bit to save on that, I think we'll be good.
Indeed. One very interesting quote from Forrester: on average, every dollar invested in user experience brings 100 in return. So let's start with this interesting conversation, and let's start first with you, Georgina, with the question, why should we focus on user experience right now? Is this finally this moment of truth for pharma to invest significantly to this movement, if I can say so. Georgina, you're muted.
I don't want to say thanks to COVID, because what's happening is a total disaster in the whole world, but because of the COVID, people are staying at home, and the way that we interact with customers is changing. We know that even elder people are adopting digital, and a lot of patients also couldn't get access to their physician, and a lot of countries have been struggling to make the right care accessible. So either we do it now that we have the capacity, and as far as we know, I think life science have the budget. People still need to see the doctor, still need to take their medicines, and people are now interacting in a way that, for example, we spend like nearly a month without seeing other people because of the confinement. And I really think that right now, because of this situation, we have an opportunity. But it's also important, as we know that we have changed the way that we interacting. The customer journey of a patient is not only going to a doctor, it's not only taking a medicine, it's much more. So life science needs to take an holistic approach and generating products and services beyond the pill, not only taking a medicine. And the question is, are we there for them? Are we prepared? How we can actually give them the right information in the right time? And it is also the moment, because there's other companies that actually are not healthcare company or life science who are putting their efforts on this, like Apple, as you know, probably know. Amazon is selling medical device, and we are also competing about time, because we need the information in our applications, in our IoT devices. People need to put their records, but at the same time, they still want to watch Netflix, for example. So the people needs and the behaviors have changed, and companies needs to emphasize with them on these needs. We are not expecting as a user only a functionality. We are expecting a 360, a companion. And I think now, because of the COVID situation, we have the opportunity.
Thank you, Georgina. Same question for you, Rahul, as well. Why should we focus right away on user experience?
Sure, absolutely. And I think the slide also justifies correctly. And sorry, I'm a bit under the bad weather today, so I may have to speak a bit slow. But I really understand that, look at COVID-19, what exactly it has done. It has done different things to our economy, to our policies, to our daily life, right? And I always say this thing is the ordinary experiences which were there till yesterday has now completely transformed to extraordinary experiences. And before even we jump into the typical healthcare and pharma side, just look at a normal consumer. Look at how subscriptions have changed completely, right? And when you talk about UI UX, that is where one of the huge amount of an ROI, again, was a key one, as discussed before as well, is a major factor. I mean, before that, something called robo or research offline and browse products offline and go ahead and buy online was kind of so important. But look at how things have changed by buy online and now pick up offline, right? And how these experiences have now to be carefully crafted. And these are newly created moments, and I would quote that at scale. And that's why, again, it's very important on why UX right now. So customers are completely expecting diverse shopping experiences, right? And if you look at that as in store, Black Friday is about to be canceled. Look how Walmart is moving more towards subscription models, and how while there are more Amazon Go and Whole Food stores kind of opening around us. So UX again plays a very, very major role around that. Another key part on why UX is, one thing which I have learned in my entire UX career, I can say, is you can't design for the entire journey every time. You always have to carefully pick handcrafted, very special moments, which then you can really design, you can really craft it, and that really brings in the customer delight. At least you have to at least start it out there, because no company has amount of talent, resources to fix everything and to make delighted in across the entire journey. There will be gaps, there will be ups and downs, and it's important that how can you detect those early warning signals. Another aspect I was thinking why UX, when you asked that, Dario, is even for us as people who look at experience or design side, the amount of cybersecurity awareness, which now has to be increased, is kind of such huge importance. I would say UX also has to play important part in, you don't only have to do your health checkup, but how can, if you have a platform, get people to do their privacy checkup more on where their data is being stored. All those things are there, but it really gets the right dedicated journeys and dedicated queues for people to really take those journeys and actually complete those tasks and kind of complete those goals, so your data or your patients or your consumers can be more secured as such. So I would say, if you only look at the cyber security aspect of it, I would say UX would. Why UX? Because it can increase importance more about social distancing, online as well, offline, and also about social engineering. So if you even go on the topic which are not very design focused, and that's why I want to bring up some different perspective, which is not heard of a lot of time in the design discussions, is this is where UX are kind of making those key difference. There's a lot of things which are getting recalibrated, which are getting reprioritized, and which are getting realigned. And it's important to understand how people can get that. For example, in a testing environment, the moment when you get your test results is such an important moment. How you carefully design that. If you are in COVID times tested positive, how you tell that to people. What happens next? If the doctor is available for the call, then what happens? If a nurse picks up, or if there's a wait time of 30 minutes, how do you craft that? So it's not only important upon doing that, but the amount of interdependence between all the channels and all the journeys has become more complex and more comprehensive. So I would rest saying that is we have to look at all these different aspects, right? If marketing has gone omni-channel, UX also has gone omni-channel, and we have to look at different perspectives, which just sometimes don't think, because a lot of time it's just about how can we just reduce our error rates or time on task, but UX has really gone beyond and is demanding the right resources, talent, skills, and charter for people to look and invest on.
Thank you, Rahul. Let's move forward to Ritesh, and I really like this headline, why user experience. So Ritesh, could you maybe explain the opportunities which are offered to life science organizations to differentiate themselves from one to another with this particular user experience team?
Well, I think Rahul covered it all, so I'm just going to hand it back to you. Only kidding. Look, in pharma, we've always been siloed, and we still continue to be, even though the digital world has hit us very hard, like a Mack truck that came out of nowhere because of the pandemic. We're still holding on to, with dear life, the silos that we have. So in the old world, it was an interruption model. It was a model where the rep interrupted you in your daily chores as you were going around looking and talking to patients to say, can you give me a minute and let me show you what's on my iPad? And we're trying to replicate that model with a rep triggered email first thing in the morning. Well, about 900 emails are now hitting the doctors every morning because every pharma company has discovered email all of a sudden. What we've got to do is do what Rahul's talking about, which is how do we connect these things up for the healthcare professional, understanding where they are, what they're doing, and then where we fit into that workflow is very important. And data gives us that, right? If we have the right data, our data is completely siloed at the moment. We have our Viva CRM data, we have our Salesforce data, we have our opt-in email database, we have, cordon data, we have our prescriber data. All of these are connected differently. So how do we bring them together? Can we look at a hospital? Within the hospital, who are the people that we talk to? Let's just take that as an example. What are their criteria for engaging with us? What's the most important thing they need from us at a moment in time? And then design a system of experience around that. I think that may be a better and intelligent approach than saying, this is my healthcare professional journey. This is how my Salesforce interacts with them. This is what I do for search. Here's my social media. This is my website with the healthcare professional portal, and they're all completely disconnected. The other bit is it really reduces your brand in the marketplace, because each of those experiences are different and your brand impression is different based on that experience. So that dilutes your brand proposition with the customer, which drives NPS scores in most cases. So, you know, look at the data that you have. How can you bring it together to get a really good understanding of your customer? Create a day in the life of your customer and how they sort of go through their day to day, which is completely different to 6 months ago. And then where do we fit into that day? What are the things that we can give them that adds value and builds our brand with them? What's the experience we want to provide them? Those are the kinds of things I think about and that we should think about.
Thank you very much, Ritesh. Well, I think that there's this very interesting quote from Mike Gebbia, who credits user experience with taking the company Airbnb to a $10 billion company, according to Forbes. Of course, the valuation actually decreased recently because of the whole COVID situation. But what I hear really a lot of time is that there is a clear relationship between user experience and customer experience, right? But if you ask me, they are really very interconnected. It's like having a house without a roof, right? Which means it has to be all together. User experience comes together with great customer experience, and this is something what we should definitely speak about today, and we definitely already started with that. But in terms of that, Corey, what is this particular relationship from your perspective between user experience and customer experience?
Yeah, I think Ritesh used a key word there of silo, right? We think about the different departments that you have across your organization. How much are they actually working together? And I think traditionally user experience, we talk about that one step of the journey or different steps of the journey. Customer experience elevates it to the whole thing. What is that whole journey, right? So you're going to have these beautiful moments along the journey, but you have to think of, if you've got big gaps between those steps, that's where your customers fall off. That's where your NPS falls off. That's where your support lines go on fire because people are unhappy. And so to me, the way I really like this is that user experience is a very well established discipline, right? So we look at these things about information architecture. Is it clear what you're presenting, and can people understand it? What is the research of your user? What's important to them? What's valuable? All of those elements of user experience can then be pushed up to those higher level customer experience things. Think about the interaction design component of user experience, where usually we're talking interaction design of a website or buttons on a piece of software. That same kind of interaction design process can be put through to a face-to-face meeting or a telephone call. So all of those things can come forward, and you can design those things. And you may not be able to design the whole thing, but you can at least have, just like when you're designing the visual design or the information architecture, you have a style guide. You can take those same concepts of style guide to, here's how the team should interact and behave on different elements of the customer journey.
Thank you. Let's do our second pooling with another interesting question, which is, how much is customer experience a priority for your organization? I would say that maybe the result will be somewhere in the middle, but let's see the results. Once again, 1 minute to complete this pool.
And while people are voting, Dario, I'll submit to you that even with all the craziness, Airbnb's valuation is larger than most of the hotel companies. So their experience has done something right for them, right?
Absolutely. Looking forward to the IPO, right?
Well, we might get into this a little bit more later, but on that initial poll where people were asking about user metrics and what do you get there, think about the Airbnb experience, right? It's not just that you want to book a place to stay. You're looking for all these other things along the way. You want to know what the space looks like in detail. You want to know where it's located. You want to know what other people have found. And all of these things that Airbnb offers have been carefully designed and curated based on shortcomings of the typical hotel experience.
Thank you, Corey. In meantime, we received the results, and interesting is that 50% sees customer experience as an area for improvement. And I would like to ask you once again to comment on these interesting results.
I think the sub question there is, who is the customer? Depending on that, right? So if you're outside of the United States, there's not much you can do with patients directly. You've got to engage with the healthcare professional in most of the markets, right? If not all. Here in the US and Australia, I think, and Japan or somewhere, a couple of countries where you can actually engage with the patients as well, there's a different model. So it also depends on who you think the customer is. Is it the nurse practitioner? Is it the physician's assistant? Is it the doctor themselves? Is there a payer engagement model here that's involved as part of this? I'm going to assume that with the attendees here, it's the US-centric set of folks, in which case you got two customers, the doctor and all of the related folks within that office and the patient.
Thank you, Ritesh. Colleagues? Who would like to comment it? Georgina?
Well,
Yeah.
I'll go ahead, Georgina.
Okay, I think improvement in customer experience is also really well defined what is customer experience, because so far there's a lot of people who are not really understanding, from my point of view, what is customer experience, and they think that it's customer service. So you're taking track of what your user is saying about your products, complainings, and I think it's much more than that. So a good way to improve is to define what is a customer experience strategy.
Here's the best response I heard recently. Well, we have a call center, they can call us. I'm like, really?
And it's maybe paid, right, per minute.
Yeah, I think one of the things people should think about is, with the touch points that you have with the customer, whether that's a doctor or another HCP or the patient themselves, what are those touch points? Just figure out what they are and what you can do. And I'll give you something that maybe not a lot of people think about is when you design the bottle for your product, is it appropriately easy enough for someone to open? Let's say if they have arthritis, or if your product is used for people with eye issues, is it easy enough for them to read the dosage instructions, right? All of those things are steps on the journey, and there are cases where it might not be the patient that's doing it. Think about the nurse who has to administer the medication, right? If it's in a hospital or clinical situation, is it built in a way that it's easy for the nurse to do within the proper safety regulations and other things that she has to juggle?
So I think, Corey, you've hit on a point, which is it easy for me to engage with you? How do you make it easy for me to do the things I need to do at the moment in time I need to do them, so that I'll continue engaging with you, right? Some of the apps on your phones, they do one thing really well, email, calendar, right? As soon as they start adding all these features to them, you find that most people still use the same old two features. Zoom has added calls in 50 countries in there, but when talking to them, people still use Zoom for one thing, video conferencing, right? So it's really essential that if you do that one thing well and people find it very easy to do, replicate some of that experience is quite interesting, I think.
Yeah.
Rahul, can you comment the results of the survey?
I think we've lost Rahul due to the weather issues that he's been having. There's a massive storm coming through, and I think he's near it, so we may have lost him.
Okay, so then maybe let's stay with you, Ritesh, and could you please give some interesting user experience examples from the industry which you appreciate most?
So yeah, it doesn't have to be life sciences or pharma. You do that in the new ways that care was being delivered. We called it concierge medicine, but the reality was people were willing to pay a little bit more on a monthly fee to go become a member of Forward in San Francisco or New York because that experience of that doctor was so vastly different than your normal GP. First of all, when you sign up, I don't know if anybody on watching or any of the panelists have done this, but I signed up just to test it. I signed up for Forward. You do it online, first of all, then you have a telehealth thing. They basically talk you through it. Then you go for a personal visit. It's probably 3/4 of a day, but they tested me for everything. Weight, they tested how fat I was, unfortunately, and told me I was overweight. All of the things, diet, etc. And then you're able to monitor how you're doing on a monthly basis. And there's telehealth 24/7, all of the things, all for $99 a year, right? I'm willing to pay that little bit more to get that experience, because that's the healthcare partner experience that I want and frankly was looking for. And there are millions of people who are doing that. So I think, you know, people will, if the experience feels easy for them, is valuable for them, they will then go engage with it in droves. I get very frustrated when I see the slide, not anymore because I'm doing webinars instead, but I've seen it once or twice, of the goldfish. You know, oh, we've got the attention span of a goldfish, 2 seconds. Well, we actually don't. If we like content, it's called binging. How many people on here binge on Netflix on something? There you go. Because we love the content. So part of that is that experience, is that engagement, that content. I'm really interested in this. I want to engage with it. So if you make it easy for me to do that, then it's going to be great. And then I'll continue doing it even more. And then I'll be a brand ambassador over time, because doctors talk to other doctors. What do you think about this? Well, I had this great experience with these guys. Maybe you should go there. It's not too different.
Thank you, Ritesh. Welcome back, Rahul. Could you maybe...
We were worried that the hurricane consumed you, or whatever it was.
I thought so. I just thought I was unwell, but it just, you know, went down. And like, what happened? You know, one of those times when you don't do an update and it just forces you out. It was, I think, one of those times. Sorry.
Okay. So Rahul, could you maybe mention some interesting user experience examples from the industry, or maybe outside the industry?
Of course, a lot. I think I've seen one of the finest examples right now is really how do you go about doing testing, correct? And if you look around, if you really have to figure out and you want to test right now, it is a journey, right? You go at one place. I was going at one of the very leading chain of pharmacy, and they were saying go by mile. Every mile, and every time I have to check the availability, and every time to see the same kind of results around that. There is something called what technically could be done, and there's something what customers desire, right? And a lot of time things don't start there. Things start there, okay, we have to go live right now, let's do MVP. But I think a lot of times minimum lovable product is very important, because you really have to figure out, I would say, one thing, right? And even before I go to more examples, I love that the critical task flow journey framework. It is about what all the people do all the time, most of the people do most of the time, and kind of matrix around that. It's like if you are making a car navigation system, and if you do not, the one thing that somebody will use the most is planning a route, or marking something as favorite, or really driving to the route. If you're making another car navigation system which is exactly doing the same thing and is not solving any of the problem, just don't do it, right? So one other thing is how people are able to kind of go ahead and find the test. There's an interesting stuff I saw, how people are now receiving different kind of e-statements. And there is a kind of a lot of interesting stuff happening around there, because a lot of people want paper statements. A lot of people do not, and you know, healthcare billings and paper statement could be quite complex. A lot of people do want, like, you just can't take them away. I'm a very digital person, but for just some reason, some credit card, I just never enroll for paper. Just for some reasons, right? But and this is how kind of people are different. Some people may prefer to enroll, while some will submit your payment in a different ways. The way people enter payment, right, again, is quite complex. A lot of people talk about that checkout is always about one-step process or three-step process. Well, the research have shown it's not about the number of process, it's basically the number of input boxes. And it's not just for checkout. You really have to locate what every time people can do when they're kind of coming with you. What is their goal? What is all the people trying to do all the time, and how quickly kind of they go ahead and do that. Another good examples I've seen is there are a lot of companies who have gone, and I call this omni-channel cycle, right? Is they're really reducing the blur between a full service customer support and a self-service customer support. It is understood that the people will jump and hop between each other. There is no going, self-serve first only, or that is the only way we want to go. They have really carefully crafted that balance. Few of the hospitals I've seen that done very, very exceptionally well, kind of doing things around it. And those are, I think, some of the key things. While they're different things, I was looking at a article where now robots are being used to sanitize the hospital ICU rooms in Singapore and Thailand, right? Now, you just can't think that that's a physical thing. A robot will enter, come and do that. You have to think in the journey when somebody is in ICU room, a robot coming in, trying to maybe take up your symptoms or trying to sanitize the rooms, how the experience journey looks like, how your when you give a feedback about that, how does that look like? Does the user want that a lot? Does the user want something different? So it's very important on how you want to collect those feedbacks, and do you really want to do kind of things around it. A few also fascinating examples I've seen is, the patient, sorry, the medical representative and the doctor interaction, right, which was very much face-to-face, now has gone virtual a lot. So a lot of good innovations I'm seeing on the user experience. But the good thing I really want to highlight out there is what people are focusing. The best companies are focusing on increasing the time on ethical scientific education. They're not focused on, that's the outcome, is how do you increase the time spent on ethical scientific education? And that could be done by virtual, digital, self-service, different ways of channel, omni-channel, multi-channel communication, where UX again becomes a part. It's not just that I had a face-to-face call, I have to make a digital version of a face-to-face call. No, right? What is your key outcome? The key outcome, which we have seen in training, is not just how can you train by having people at a kind of same room, but I've seen a lot of companies are innovating on how do you create more ambassadors of certain therapies, of digital, even for UX. And that's a see-through change which is happening across the industry. Is the training curriculums are not only focused on telling sales rep about pharma or scientific education, it's also about creating those digital champions, UX evangelists within the head offices or the regional and the local hubs to kind of go and spread that. So, and again, I'm trying to put intentionally an uncomfortable, different twist to it, because a lot of time these things are not spoken about. There are beautiful websites I can talk about, amazing app experiences, easy way to get tested in 3 clicks. But those something you would possibly know. But this different dimensions of what's happening on the training side. Another beautiful example I saw in scientific clinical research, right? So a lot of clinical research is now getting remote. And when you craft that journey, a lot of things are, you just cannot get to your home computers, right? So when those things are being taught, how would somebody access that if they don't have access right now? How a remote virtual care, patient care will change? Those things are again very, very important, because not every time you will have all those things, especially that we saw a lot kind of a quarter back. I think now things are settled down, but this is gonna evolve over a period of time. So I think that's again interesting. So scientific education, remote monitoring, patient education, understanding more complexities, what doctors are going through. How can you make still science very easy to consume and very snackable? Just because we are pharma and we are healthcare, we don't have to be verbose, right? And there is a lot that we can look and learn around on how companies are really making this scientific education snackable, because now scientific education needs to be given to more people, just because the gravity of scientific education, people want to learn, that has increased immensely. And how companies are going to capture that, and whosoever gets that engagement model first will actually start doing a lot of things around that. So there's a lot of stuff happening. I'm not sure some of this thing were discussed, maybe because I missed with my bad computer, but hopefully that gave you a few nuggets on what are the things happening as the best examples which at least I saw around.
You didn't miss much. We talked about Airbnb's valuation, and that was it.
So Ritesh, let's stay with you, and could you maybe describe what are those key user experience principles, and how do you apply these principles in life science companies or content or any other process or workflow?
Yeah, I think the main one I alluded to when I kicked off, which is understand the customer. Who is that person, that human you're trying to interact with? How do they behave? Collect the data that you have around them and see if you can pull it all together in a way that makes you understand what they're looking for from an integration and interaction with you. You find a lot of the startups will look at a use case and then figure out where they can be disruptive and where they can be innovative, and then take that and then really hammer down on all of the things they need to change of that user experience to make theirs the better one than the one that is currently being used, right? So we should be using the same principles in pharma and in life sciences. And then the last thing is, it is okay to test and learn and fail, and test and learn and fail. For some reason, our culture in pharma is all about get it perfect before we launch it. And most every startup I work with, it's about 3 months into their test, because they figure out from the interaction with the customers that, hey, what we thought the customer loved and the journey they went on was not exactly what they did. And there was these 3 things that they did that were better. So let's pivot and change those and then launch in the market. And we need to have some of that mentality in life sciences, I think. We can do that. We can use all sorts of techniques to do that, test and learn and iterate in an agile manner very, very quickly. Georgina, I saw you nodding away there. So
yeah, so in terms of moving forward, Georgina, question to you, and this is what are the main areas of applications for user experience in life sciences, and what are the user experience related metrics to focus on?
Okay, there's user experience should be part of the internal journey, as I mentioned before. So we can have from digital marketing, patient engagement, digital channels, HCP engagement, and technology is helping us to give this better user experience. And as someone said before, design system, clinical trials, cybersecurity, all of these lead to a better user experience and impact the overall customer experience, because at the end, what we want is to improve customer experience. And it's not only improving our training, but it's also to improve our user experience as people who work in a life science company, how we can get better human factors, how we can get faster in terms of regulation, in risk assessment. And I think technology also is helping us a lot to automate a lot of this part of the process. The problem is that, and somebody said before, there's more touch points and there's more silos. So how we can, everyone that is in this overall customer experience works in the same strategy, because what is happening now is that you have marketing going in a way and the product is totally different from the marketing campaign. So things that can help to actually stop working in silos is doing kickoff workshops or the design sprint methodology from Google, who helps to put all the stakeholders in the same room, at least from the beginning. So it can be medical, it can be marketing, regulatory. So you have all the requirements from everyone. So at least for this product or these projects, there will not be as much silos as it used to be, because everyone is going for the same user persona, the same value proposition. We are all going to be using the same tone of voice for the product and for the other things that come in from the product. Another thing regarding the metrics, I think we have the classical metrics, which is engagement, item on task, how engagement also, how the time that we spend in an application. But I think in terms of healthcare company, we should be focusing in something else, which is Emotional Design, a book by Don Norman. It is true that this book is from physical, but it can be applied also in the digital space, because a bit resume of the work is why we love or hate everyday products and why we spend much money in some other ones. So for me and from Don Norman, user experience means to be in touch with user feelings, because what you need to do at the end is to generate a positive impact. If you generate a positive feeling, people will remember you. People will actually engage more on this application. People will recommend you. If you have a bad interaction from the beginning, people will stop using you and this app will die, or even the product. So even if we think that we need those metrics in a more scientific way, I think it's important because a disease impacts in a person's lives, and it's the way that you feel with the disease, because I cannot actually run my normal life because I cannot run, I cannot see my daughter, so you have feelings. And at the end, we need to also solve these kind of feelings. And one thing that Don Norman says, and I think is super important, is to treat this product as a person. Because actually, why you go with your friends? Because you share the same values, because you share the same opinions, because you love the same beers, let's call it that way. So in a product, in a healthcare product that you're actually looking for a 360, and it's much more than a drug or a channel, is a companion who will help you through your all disease, all the steps of your disease. You need to share the same feelings, the same way. You want to be talked at the same way as you talk. You cannot have an application who is yelling at you all the time because you are not taking the medicine. So, and thanks to the technology, we can give more personalized applications, more personalized treatment, and we can know better our use. And thanks to artificial intelligence, with the data in the back end running all the time, we know much more better what is the use that we used to know before. So another thing also that is important is to create meaningful products. Before, we used to think in functional, reliable, measurable. Now we need something meaningful. I want to use you because there's a meaning for me on this application. Otherwise, there's no sense because there's a lot of drilling. We are not looking anymore for a functionality. I don't want to measure my heart rate. I want to measure it and I want you to give me some advice about it, some suggestions. But at the same time, I want suggestion, but I don't want to feel patronized. I want to feel informed, but I don't want to feel overwhelmed. So those kind of metrics are really important in the way that we actually build the products. And this has to be defined at the beginning. You cannot actually build the product and then define the metrics. The metrics need to be defined at the beginning. What we are looking for. Are we actually making the user happy? So is this a key metric? Let's test this. And to finish, a way to define and to measure is to frame. And designing with a purpose, I think it's really important for healthcare, pharma, life science companies to think that a disease, no matter what disease, has an impact in people's life. And that drives to frustration, stress, how we can also solve these things that happen because of the disease. Because maybe you don't have cancer anymore, but you cannot do some of the things that you used to do before. How we can help them in a psychological way as a companion to get used to the new normal life. So I think metrics, we have the standard metrics, but we need to think in another out-of-the-box metrics.
Thank you, Georgina. Corey?
You're welcome.
Georgina mentioned metrics, so question to you, how to measure user experience, or what are those key metrics from your experience coming from a solution vendor side?
Right. Yeah, to me, it's a really good question. One of the things this group talked about before when we were prepping for the session was really tailoring the metrics that you need to your user and to the case. I think it was Georgina who had said it, so I want to make sure she gets credit for it. And to me, I think there's two parts to it, right? One is our initial inclination with metrics is to do what's important for us, right? So we take something like, I need to measure my lead generation, right? Whether that's new sales or clients for a trial or whatever it is. How do you flip that into something that's more meaningful and more personalized, right? So you might flip that to the patient context, right? How can I help more patients get registered for a clinical trial or help them solve their health crisis. Another thing I think that's important there is to think about the 5 whys, right? So you can ask why do we want to measure lead generation or clinical trial sign up, and keep going down and down. And so maybe it's not that you want to get more leads, but maybe it's you want more qualified leads. And maybe it's not you want more qualified leads, but you want more leads that close, right? So think of those things. And what does a lead that close mean from the customer perspective, right? It's a customer who's satisfied, they've solved a problem, or they've met their needs. So if you think of your metric is not now that we want to have 1,000 hot closes this month. Our metric is we want to solve this health crisis for 1,000 stage 4 oncology patients, right? You're getting more focused both on what is the customer patient issue, but it's also more meaningful for your team, right? Because a lot of times these metrics of increased lead generation are vague, and it's not clear to people how they can do it. But you think of something like help people with stage 4 cancer, then the team really knows here's what we can do to help with that. So I think you can start with your initial metrics that come to mind, and you had a list there of some typical ones, and I know there's other ones. Think about those. How do you turn it customer centric, and how do you turn it deep and meaningful for everyone in the organization?
Thank you, Corey. Ritesh, key metrics.
Sorry, had to unmute. On top of what Corey said, I think sometimes we get so enamored by the metric of pharma, which is how many new scripts did we generate from this thing? And I think we need to be talked off the ledge of that first, and maybe talk through, per that slide earlier, if we do this and change this experience, what will it do for the brand? What will it do for the customer? What will it do overall for the product? And then how does it result to sales? And I think if we focus that way, then we'll change our mindset and how we think of experiences. A lot of times, pharma companies go into, and particularly brand marketers and brand managers will go into something with a, how many impressions will I get, or how many clicks will I get, or how many prescriptions will I sell? And I think that's the only big cultural shift that I would encourage everybody listening to this starts to think about is, what's the experience going to look like, and how will it lead to a sale, and what are the touch points I need to do that along that journey to convince the person that our product, service, whatever it is better than somebody else's, and then that will result in sales going forward. So that's the big sort of theme around it, is the cultural shift and the mindset shift brand managers need to make around this, that it's not about clicks, impressions, and script. That's not the only measure when it comes to user experience.
Operators, so you mean cultural shift or a cultural shock within pharma, right?
Either way, yeah, I mean, for years we were always taught that the only way to get the message to the doctor is to have the rep visit them. Right, and now we've had a bit of a shock in our system where the rep can't visit them, so now we're forced to do something differently. And I think that force of changing that exchange is driving a lot of the experience design work that we're seeing. It used to be corporate design systems. I used to see a lot of great corporate design systems. How does Merck get seen out there? Not down to the brand level, what does Keytruda fit into that Merck example, right? But now we're seeing more of that coming through, which is good.
Absolutely. Rahul, last question to you in this session, which is what are the main user experience challenges faced in life science, and what are the solutions currently applied to overcome them?
Sure, I think that's an interesting question. And challenges can be a lot, right? I'm sure everyone here can speak hour on that, especially in pharma and healthcare. But we'll look at something which is super important. One of the basic things we don't have is non-reusability. As Ritesh was talking about, right, that you have a lot of corporate design system, but you don't have that at a therapy level or at a brand level. Let me give you an example, right? So a typical brand will have multiple sites. There are sites for their payers, their providers, e-commerce. You have the same therapies in different countries and different names. or different brands, things around it. So basically the same therapy or would have different SKUs, and a lot of them have different digital assets. And across countries, across regions, if you look at the amount of time, the reusability ratio is not very good. And that is, I think, where one of the main challenges, how can you create, because there are lack of design systems, not just at a top corporate level, but something which can define around a brand design system, the reusability is very low. Second part is the adoption. There is tremendous work I see across industry with my friends, peers, which I see which kind of happens. There's a insane amount of features which gets built. As Georgina was mentioning, right, is when you start something, you really have to get your focused ROI on what you need to do. But you know, typically I've seen in pharma and healthcare is the rotation is quite high, right? People move from different brands, and it's a very good thing to do. Like you have to move with different brands, different divisions, different teams. If you're in business, go to IT, sometimes go to different quality and places. So you get a very well-rounded understanding of the industry. And a lot of times what was created originally doesn't get translated with that vision, and that river kind of stops as well. So another key part is adoption. There's a lot of amazing things which are done. How it can be done for scale, right? So there's a huge amount of number of features which are built for a patient, but the amount of features which a patient or doctor use is less. How can you increase that? Where things get missed out? Is it does a certain team needs more communication on what is available? Maybe they are new, or there are a lot of traditional pharma marketers who are trying to do a lot of good things with digital. How can we enable them more? How we can give them more ammunition? And that brings me to another key part is scale. Another key challenge in pharma and healthcare is most of the pharma and healthcare companies are in different countries, are in different regions, and are quite widespread. But the amount of scale gets missed, especially on digital, especially on UX, and that is where if there's an amazing way, for example, there could be companies who would have 25 e-commerce sites and 25 checkout flows, right? And I've seen across that in industry as well, in different sites. And is there need to have 25 checkout flows because you have 25 different brands across different regions, right? And where does that help? So scale again becomes a very, very important thing. Another key thing, which is a big challenge, is the amount of focus on accessibility. And that is where things get missed a lot. WCAG guidelines, there's a lot of regulations and challenges. A typical pharma marketer, healthcare marketer, a UX person, agencies, they actually have to go and better. And it's so close to us, right? And if I think pharma and healthcare should lead the charter of the entire domain for people with special needs and really give them more power. Especially look at in the COVID times, right? If you are making even a landing page which is not following the WCAG guidelines, you're not doing well, right? And it's not just about WCAG guidelines, it's about looking internally on how can you train marketers not to every time ask an agency to give you 3 design options in 3 days, but to really give how can you include the brief about people with special needs in the brief that you're giving out? Can you score your brief less if the creative agency receives a brief where it doesn't talk about what will happen? Because a lot of time it's assumed that it is someone else's role. A marketer will think it is an agency's role. Agencies will think the IT has to give us guidelines, or the marketer has to give us guideline. IT may think that by the time stuff comes to them, everything is taken care of. And somehow, and this is across industry, right? Things may get missed. So accessibility is something I think we all have to get together, do more. Storytelling, I see pharma doing a lot with gender, with people with color, but again, including people with special needs in a storytelling can be so important. So this topic itself, and I get very emotional when I talk about it, is again so important, and it's a big challenge. And how do we all industry come together and do something about it? So because we all have to learn and get inspired from someone. If somebody really has done something fantastic for a certain therapy area on this topic itself, how can other kind of take advantage of that? So to summarize, adoption, reusability, scale, and looking for giving things with people with special needs. These are the 4 things I would highlight, something where UX can make a strong impact and is a challenge where we possibly could go and address.
Thank you, Rahul. We are left with exactly 5 minutes, and I selected one question from the audience, which is quite interesting in my opinion. And this is, in your opinion, why didn't pharma benefit from their consumer areas to learn about patients? Who would like to give the answer first?
Can you repeat it once again, please?
Sure. In your opinion, why didn't pharma companies benefit from their consumer divisions to learn about patients?
Well, one is very product driven, the other one is very science driven, right?
Exactly.
I think that's one of the biggest issues is the silos between, the clinically driven scientific folks who are in RX versus consumer OTC. And I think if you looked at it the other way on the question is, why don't the consumer guys learn from the pharma guys about engaging healthcare professionals for professional marketing? So I think part of that is the silos, I would submit, but we've got people who work in the industry who probably know better than I do. And that's
yeah.
One is the silos, and another one also I think is that we are missing somehow design mindsets in pharma companies. So we have somehow the insights, but because we have the data, but we don't have enough people to translate them in a product or in an experience or in a customer experience. That is my opinion. Because the data is here, because you have the commercial people who has a lot of feedback from HCP, you have the customer service who is full of reports and tons of data, but there is somehow a missing person in between who can translate all this in something tangible, in a product or in actions or in marketing campaigns or in advertising, whatever needs to do the pharma company. I think there is a gap there that needs to be solved somehow.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I think you can look at a lot of industries who've made that shift, right? Where many things started as, I've got this great idea, I'm going to push it out there and make it available to people. Over time, competition came up, and then people had to get more crafty about how they connect with customers. And I think maybe part of the nature of pharma and life sciences is, because of the deep science and learning and knowledge that goes into these products, people haven't been forced as much to make those changes, but now we start seeing where patents are running out and generics are rising and everything else. So, that history advantage has sort of run out. And really, I think the pharma and life sciences companies have really been in a push kind of mode, and now they've got to start balancing push and pull, because as we see in other industries, consumers, whether it's the doctors or the patients or others, have so much more choice and so much more education behind what they're doing. So the models and the communication channels are all changing.
Yeah, well said, Corey. And I will just add that I do see there's a lot of pockets where people are learning, but I think why is a question. I would say 2 key factors, right? One is the way that we learn has to shift within healthcare and pharma. It should not always be about learning from a community of practice or having a center of excellence, and that's only where you can go and do. You need an industrial mindset shift of doing hackathons to understand how the consumer division have done that. How could you do it? How could you quickly do rapid prototyping? Till the time those mindsets do not come in the traditional pharma, I think the learning from what the consumer focus folks are doing, I think is kind of quite different. So I think that is there. Yeah, and another thing is the term digital marketing. So a lot of time, we spend a lot of time on the word marketing in the digital marketing, but digital is so powerful to give you different experiences and create things, again, from scientific collaboration to end consumer engagement. You have to broaden up than just thinking how do you engage with few stakeholders, rather what you can do with digital. So I think those are the 2 key challenges. There's still kind of a rift between, not rift, but kind of divide between consumer and the pharma traditional people.
Great. So with that thought, I would like to finish this very, very interesting session, which will also be published on our official YouTube channel. So thank you once again, Georgina, Corey, Rita, Rahul, for this pleasant conversation. Take very good care and hopefully see you next year in amazing Dubrovnik. So thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye. Bye.